I'll let you know when.
I'll get it back in sample. Sort it out. Councillors,
We'll let you know when we're live.
No, I've got the same problem. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll welcome councillors and welcome those on live screening to council meeting of today, the ordinary council meeting 29th of April 2021. I will remind councillors and people in the room, please, that the microphones are reasonably sensitive. If you wish to discuss your weekend's activities, it's likely to be broadcast. We will move into public excluded at around 3:15. I'll call for apologies. First, I have an apology from Councillor Kororokawa. I think that's the only one. Would somebody like to so move? Thank you. Councillor Carter, Councillor Hero seconding. Those in favour? Right. Those against? Carried. We don't have a public forum that I'm aware of. And I'll remind councillors of the rules around conflicts of interest and declarations. And in terms of confirmation of the order of business, as I said, we will look to move into public excluded 3:15. I am expecting to deal with the roading one, the renewal of contract at 1:30, with Mr. John Jones in attendance. Are there any other changes to the order of business from staff? You're looking to the confirmation of minutes, looking for alterations and corrections. And starting on effectively page 7, looking for alterations, corrections. Councillor Duncan.
It says page 8 here on my one, just at the very beginning, present. I wasn't present, but my apologies are in there.
We probably can't have both. Looking to move that as an amendment. Seconded by Councillor Carter. Those in favour? Looking for further corrections. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Would somebody like to so move?
Your worship,
As
there's another. I'm sorry,
Yes, Councillor Gordon.
got another correction along the same lines as Councillor Duncan. I was actually absent.
You were absent.
Yep. And I'm present, so I was actually absent, and it's recorded in the apologies.
Councillors, are you happy if I take that with the amendment previously covered in terms of attendance?
Yes.
As amended, would like somebody, Councillor Belsham moving, seconded. Councillor Carter, those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. That deals with that. The follow-up action items from the previous meeting, item 4, and starting page 19. Ms. Gordon, would you like to take us through this?
I'm happy to take any questions, but there is one clarification that Arno will speak to, which is about halfway down the page around the staff to confirm the scope of interior painting. So I'll just pass that one over.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I answered the question in light of what was in the original budget planned to be done with those funds. That is different to what is going to be painted as part of the upgrade of the hall under the new contract.
So just for clarification, we're now talking on, around the Hunterville Community Committee costings. What is it?
This is the Marton Memorial Hall.
So the item reads, staff to confirm the scope of interior painting within the council contribution to the project.
Yep, that's right. So I'll quickly run through that. The original scope was for the 2 toilets in the Memorial Hall. With us doing the project with the funding that we received, what will be painted as part of that contract is the walls and the seating of the RSA room and everything above the wooden wall paneling in the main hall. So top of the walls, the ceilings, the beams, and the window frames. And I will update that table with this information, just to be clear on exactly what it is.
Okay.
Yeah, just one more thing is, Gaiden is looking at doing those toilets under the budget under the new financial year to cover that work.
Okay. Any further questions around that item? Are you taking the rest of the report as a tabled report? So thank you. Any further questions around the actions arising? Councillor Belsham.
So in regards with the discussions around the RSA signage, yeah, that didn't, your last answer didn't include that, is that correct? So, and I couldn't recall finding any other information in today's order papers, so can I have some update in regards with that, please?
Absolutely, through you, Mr. Chair, again. What's happened is when we went back to the RSA, they've changed their mind on the whole design of the signage, and they haven't completed that. So for us, it's impossible to get a price and come back to council with how much it'll cost until they finalise these. It shouldn't be too far off, and we're hoping to bring that number to you in the May council meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
I presume that we have actually checked that the old signage isn't in storage somewhere.
That's a good question. I'll follow up on that.
I'd hate to see us paying out for new signage and then down the track we find it's upstairs in the storeroom. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I have a question around the Creative New Zealand Funding Assessment Committee's request to reimburse committee members. I'm assuming that's still twice a year, those meetings. I'm just wondering where that funding for mileage and attendance would come from, and if that would then come out of the Creative Communities budget for the district.
Councillor Belsham may wish to comment, but I don't think that there'd be proviso within those budgets to be able to fund it. If it was to be funded, it would have to be part of council's funding package.
I'll comment. I understood that that was the answer to that question when it was raised at the last meeting, that people that sit on that committee do that on a voluntary basis. And so mileage, and that goes for all the other grants committees, the mileage and transportation is covered by the volunteer, not the actual group fund.
You happy with the answer?
Thank you.
Any further questions around the actions follow-up? No. Would somebody like to move the receipt of that report, please? Councillor Lambert moving, Councillor Duncan second. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Now we move to the Mayor's report, page 21, your agenda. Note that it's authorised for the first time through school. Is that a new change? I would have thought it was my report. I authorise it.
Slightly. I think my name is here because of the way Info Council produces these. Usually I take that off, but I missed it. So it's definitely your report. I just over authorised it.
I thought there was going to be a reasonable explanation. Look, I'm not going to read my report. I'll take it as read. I will comment a little bit further around Zone 3 and the trip to Hastings. What was memorable in Hastings was the vast sums of money that have been put into that district via government funding. So some of it's in housing projects, some of it is a huge amount has gone into the rebuild of the Opera House, which is absolutely stunning. but certainly they've been sitting the right side of Parliament, I suspect.
I'm just going to add to that, Your Worship. I've made a request to the Chief Executive of Hastings District Council to have Gayleen and some of her team visit them such that we can learn as much as we can, particularly around the interface with the Kāinga Order.
But I'll take any questions around my report and the number of functions I've attended. Councillor Dalgety.
Worship, around the Three Waters and the lack of general public knowledge of what's happening in the space. I was interested in our meeting on Tuesday evening with the Tudenui Rural Supply farmers. They were sort of saying that council hasn't said anything about it. And yeah, so I was just, how are we going to handle this going forward?
We have been saying things about it. So I've been expressing opinion not only to council but to press and to virtually to every long-term plan meeting that we've attended. Yes, I have real concerns that this is the biggest change to local government that there has ever been. And there is a shortage of information on which councillors will need to make a decision this year around whether we will continue to deliver wastewater, stormwater and drinking water supplies right across our district. So every council is going to face that this year. It will be enacted in 2 to 3 years' time, but the decision period is this year. And I, for one, don't believe that our council, and certainly not the community, have been adequately informed to make that basis of decision. And I have also commented further to say that I believe the engagement process with the iwi has even been poorer. The government has signalled that it will spend a lot of time this year with a campaign of information. You could say it would be a marketing campaign for government's position, probably. But it's scary. Councillor Gordon, further question around this?
With view to the comments you just made on Councillor Dalgety's request, and in view of the comments that Minister Nanaia Mahuta made on Friday, are you going to be commenting, would you like to comment now or at a later stage about where you see local government in general going?
Okay. So if you get the stripping away of councils delivering wastewater, drinking water, stormwater provisions, you get, first of all, get a lot of stranded overheads that councils face. But it is a core function of especially rural councils, but it's a core function of all councils. So the question that then remains is what then will be the function of local government? So the Minister has said on several occasions that local government will be as important as ever, but the role may well change. So we haven't had clear guidelines around what the future role will be. There's been talk around the social services type provisions. So you can take into that there could well be a function for councils around health provisions or housing and those sorts of things. Some things have been ruled out of the discussion. For instance, we're not going to be delivering fire services as happens in America, for example. Principal education has probably been ruled out of that picture as well. It is potentially there are all sorts of benefits, and government will put up those for the aggregation of supply of these things. There may well be benefits for councils in terms of a localism attitude in delivering social type services. I might pass over a comment also from the Chief Executive here. He, like I, have sat in an enormous number of meetings with regard to this.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think regarding the future of local government, just to recall that the Minister has announced a review. Now, it's chaired by Jim Palmer, the former Chief Executive of the Waimakariri District. So it has a very experienced chair in the role. And local government New Zealand have been very active in ensuring that all councils have their say in that process, and we will be encouraged extensively to have our say in that process. So I'm comfortable that we will have a position that will be made to the review panel. If I can, Your Worship, also just respond or comment to Councillor Dalgetty's question on Three Waters. The central government have announced that they will have a consultation and a campaign that runs in the third quarter of this year. And we wanted to separate that consultation from LTP consultation, which is led by council. And that will be a national campaign because it applies to the whole country, and will be instead of council or each individual council having their individual consultation, because it is a matter of significance. And that your feedback you've had, I would support His Worship that he has mentioned it at every possible opportunity in his mayoral reports. Virtually everything we go to, we lead with Three Waters reform. What's important, I think, as well, is it's difficult for us to go to the public when we still have questions ourselves. And what I can't say that we're being drip fed. What I can say is that we are being fed information which creates questions which the DIA then go away and answer. And that is an iterative process that we're refining as we go. And really, I think there's a right time to fully engage and the time to say, hey, look, we know this is coming, and elected members will be making a decision. It will be this year, and there will be a national consultation period in quarter 3.
The fundamental question is, if a ratepayer comes to me and says, if council continues to deliver the wastewater, what will be my bill? And under our LTP, we have programmed all of these costs. So as a business as usual, essentially we can tell them, but I cannot tell them what their bill will be under a new model. And so from a ratepayer basis, how do you then make a decision when you've only got one half of the picture?
Yeah.
That's fundamentally what it comes down to. Any further questions around that position or anything else?
Well, just to comment further on from what you've both said is, from that Tūnui meeting, the total, even one step back, like they've heard of Three Waters, but they don't know what it means. Like we're even at the point where, you know, like you want to engage them about Three Waters, but it's already, I know I pay my rates and moan about them. That's it. That's my involvement with local government. You know, like you've got to say, well, like almost shock tactics to them, like changes are coming and they're going to affect you. You know, like just to get them on board before, because my biggest concern is if the government does start this consultation with Three, a lot of people will just think it's changes that are going to happen in the background. Their life won't change. You know, like it's almost like trying to get them on board now, you know, softening them up really for what's going to happen.
So just again to stress that it is a council decision as it has been framed at the moment. It wouldn't totally surprise me if it changes from a council decision to a mandated process out of central government. That would be incredibly scary.
Yeah.
Duncan.
Thank you. Just on that, I mean, initially it was an opt-in option.
correct.
And now it's an opt-out option, and now you're saying it could be a mandated.
That's my personal view in terms of could this move to a mandated position. I personally think, but I have no evidence to back that personal view. That
I have to agree, that's very scary.
it would be scary. Anything else with regard to my report or appointment? I would like to note that in my engagements it lists 3 Anzac Day services that I've attended. I'd like to also thank the councillors that attended Anzac Day services within their own districts. So unfortunately, there isn't a process where I can log those for the community, but the community should be aware that has been happening right across the district. Councillor Duncan.
Sorry, just one other thing. During the long-term plan meetings in the Northern Ward, Your Worship was very generous in thanking the Northern Ward councillors for attending. And just reading through your report, it occurred to me that no one's actually thanked you for your 25 meetings, and considering where we had to drive up in the Northern District, it was, I want to thank you very much for making this effort. Thank you.
Anything else before I move the receipt of my report? I'll so move, looking for a seconder to it. Councillor Gordon seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. I'll just ask the Chief Executive, do you wish to?
Remit.
Yes. Sorry. The recommendation, this is the report that council supports or does not support the remit from Manawatu District Council. So this is, as you've read your agendas, this is about the remit around both a quorum and voting rights for those that are Zooming in. So the process, thank you, the process to get a remit accepted by local government conference is, first of all, you can get the support of a number of councils that you're friendly with, or you can get it moved and accepted at zone. In this case, this has been moved and accepted by zone, but it would be nice from Manawatu District Council's point of view if we are also seem to be supporting it as a council. Yeah. Would somebody like to so move? Councillor Belsham?
I'm happy to move that we support the remit from our neighbouring council.
Do you wish to speak to it? I'll get a seconder. Councillor Ash Councillor Ash is seconding. Do you wish to speak to it?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's come into place when COVID hit us, and it allowed us to continue our business meetings. And I think the ability for elected members to be able to Zoom in to a meeting and have the opportunity to speak and to vote on subjects should be a matter of course. It's technology that's come on board, and I think local government's certainly taken it with both hands and made it work for them. And I think it should be part of the natural course of us moving forward.
Is there anybody that wishes to speak against this? No, are you happy if I put it straight to a vote? The vote, those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. You wish to John Jones or you?
No,
Yes,
it's Ms Jones, if he wishes now he's here. If that suits you. Yeah.
So you take him first.
Yes, that's okay.
Right. I'll look to change the order of council business for today. I'll move straight to the report on signing of the contract for road maintenance, 3-year extension. This report is contained in page 46, and I'll invite those are John Jones to the table to explain.
Good afternoon, councillors, your worship. So, the newer people, the road maintenance and renewal contract is a term maintenance contract that can go for 9 years. So we've had the first 3 years and they've been rolled over. So we just come into the end of the second 3 year, and then this is where we decide whether or not to roll over again. So the contract says that provided the contractor meets the performance criteria, which they have, council can then approve the rollover. Of course, they can also decide not to. It's entirely up to council. But back in September 2020, council endorsed the procurement strategy and said that if Higgins' performance criteria is met, that we will roll over the last 3 years. So this is where we're at. It's the same thing with MDC. MDC's approved the rollover, and so we're doing it now so that the people who work for Higgins can have certainty and sleep easy at night. So that's it. If you've got any questions.
I have a question. First of all, I'm not sure that our principal concern should be how they sleep at night. But having said that, the issue that I'd raise is when this contract was originally put together with 3 contributing councils, there were 2 potential rates. There was one rate that said this would be the cost if all councils had agreed to it. In other words, group buying power. And there was a different rate if that didn't happen, and for instance, just Rangitikei, for instance, decided to go with a contract with Higgins. So if we had had the situation where the other partners hadn't agreed, would we have faced a different rate in this renewal? Or if we didn't agree, does that change the rate for Manawatu?
Yeah, contractually, when all 3 contracts went out, Higgins offered a 1% discount if they got all 3. And they've stuck by that 1%. I think, I'm not sure if Horifena has gone their own way. Or they're still.
I think they're still with Higgins.
Yeah, so the agreement remains intact. So all 3 councils have a contract with Higgins, and they got that 1% discount. So Manawatu are going to carry on. Now, if Rangitikei decided not to carry on with Higgins, there could be, Higgins would probably have an argument that that 1% doesn't apply anymore, but I don't think they will, because they're looking for the long term. This is the last of the 3 years. They want to be on side with their clients, and they'll just carry on.
So just a second follow-up to this in terms of councillors' position. If council was not going to approve this rollover, then we'd be going back to seek a contract we'd be back into a contractual round.
Yeah, what we'd do then, we've only got, where are we? April's nearly gone. May, June, we've got 2 months here. And then that contract would be over, so you would have nobody. So what people have done in the past is you'll extend the contract for 6 months while you write a new one. You'd have to go back to NZTA and say, we've changed our mind with the procurement strategy. This is what we're doing now. So that would have to go back to Wellington, getting endorsed by them, come to council, get endorsed again. And then you'd write your contract, you'd go out to tender. But the thing is, this period of time that we're in now is there is an extreme shortage of resources. The market is overheated. We're getting tenders coming in now. They're 23% over engineers' estimate. People have got that much work. They'll put in a crazy price to see if you want to pay for it. So in the other document that's associated with it, all of this is the asset management plan. And we've identified that this is the current status of the market, and that what we're proposing for the next 3 years is nothing too complicated, so that we can work with the resources we have. Because we know that if you go out to tender now, you've got extremely competitive rates at the moment. You go out now, you could be up to, God, think of a number and see what they can get away with.
Your worship, Mr. Jones presented, and I just want to double check this. If I have understood the process correctly, in September last year, council approved the procurement strategy.
Yeah.
And that strategy said we would extend the Higgins contract by a further 3 years should they meet performance targets.
That's right.
And so the only question that we've really had since then is, have they performed? Yes, no.
Yes, they have.
The decision to go with them has already been made. So really the risk was that they didn't, suddenly they stopped performing in that period.
That's right.
Yeah. So we've got a kind of plan B, and that if they didn't perform, we would extend it by 6 months. And, but we've already kind of covered off from a well in advance that if elected members chose they wanted to change or wanted to renew the contract, we would have known that in September last year, and we would have had 9 months to renew it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sorry.
Just hold on a sec. It's my role to make sure that councillors are aware where these things sit in terms of your decision-making framework. Sorry, Mr. Jones.
Just on the procurement strategy, you recall we did a market research because it was all 4 councils all got together, and we did as they call a deep dive into what's going on in the market, and with the gorge and Ohakia and everything else that's going on, the boom in housing construction. The market's tapped out, so the wisest course of action was to carry on with what you've got, subject to performance.
Councillor Belsham.
Thank you, Worship. So I've had a couple of questions, and they are based around performance. And in your report, you've got that the contractor has an average score greater than 600 points, according to the contractor performance monitoring system. Are you confident that they're performing more than adequately for us to proceed with this? And you've said they've passed the line. Have they got 1 point past the line, or are they actually?
Oh no, it's like 6 out of 10 is the pass mark.
Yeah.
And its average is about 7. It's never going to get more than that because they will have priced it to meet the performance criteria. They're not going to gild the lily because you lose money. So we track it. We do a performance appraisal every month, and any issues that come up are agreed. Then it's a NZTA process called a PACE. Performance appraisal form, and then we log all those and we graph it, and we've been graphing it for the past 6 years.
So the second question relates on a similar vein. Are you confident that you've already explained that the resources in that industry are absolutely stretched? Are you confident as a contractor providing to our district council that they will have adequate resources to deliver the program that we've put in front of them?
Well, Rangatiki's in a better place than Manawatu because the guys there, that depot is relatively stable. It's been the same ones from when they were downers, and they just, when you get a new contractor, it's the same thing, they just put a different hat on. So they're embedded in the community, and they're not going anywhere. Fielding, it's a bit closer to Palmerston North. It's a bit like musical chairs there. So they're performing, but they do have their issues with retaining staff because they all live in around Fielding and Palmerston, and if somebody offers them $15 an hour to drive a digger in the gorge, they'll take it.
Thank you. I have questions for Councillor Wilson, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Wilson.
Very
Chair of,
question.
I should note that Councillor Wilson, those online, is Chair of Assets.
Thank you, Chair and Your Worship. Just for a start, I'd just like to move the receipt of the report, and so that we can have a little bit more detailed discussion of it. So I'd like to move the receipt of the report.
Councillor Belsham seconding. Those in favour?
Thank you.
Those against?
So yeah, just a quick question for you, John, and also acknowledging the Chief Executive's comments from previous council meeting. This is the end of a 3-year, effectively 3 to 3 rollover.
It's a three-year terms,
Yeah.
up to
So
a
this is
maximum of 9.
Up to the
So
maximum
this
9.
is the end of 6.
In a 6, so
So
effectively
we're going
we'll
into
take it
the
through.
last 3.
The last 3, that's exactly what I meant. So the point being is, at what stage do we start to, just for future reference, at what stage are we going to be having a look at this contract? What stage, could you just tell us what stage we're going to have a look at to what we do in 3 years' time? Do we start that process in a year or 12 months or 18 months? Or when do we...
Arno and I have had a discussion of this. We're going to do the last procurement strategy was done by consultants and involved 4 councils. We are going to do our own procurement strategy. I will do a thorough analysis of the market. I'm going to look at the different types of contracts that are available. You know, there's alliancing, there's traditional contract, then there's hybrids, then there's the NOC contract that NZTA have. I've read the audit report on that. I don't think that would be a goer. So there's the different types of contract, and then the different mechanisms for payment within those contracts and the terms. We'll look at the budgets that we'll be putting forward in 3 years' time. So it's like Groundhog Day. As soon as you come to 1st of July for the last 3 years, you start again. So we'll start planning the asset management plan, the procurement strategy. We'll do a thorough analysis of it, and we'll bring a paper to council saying, we've looked at all of this. Here's a procurement strategy. We think the best type of contract would be whatever. And then council goes, yes or no. And then we write the contract, and then we need to go out to tender, close the tender 6 months before this 3 years. So it starting 3 years, so you want to be, after 2 years, you will have to firm up on what we're going to do for the future, write the strategy, get it endorsed by NZTA in about August of that last year, and then go out to tender, and as PNCC did recently, close it just before Christmas, assess the contract, then bring it to council, award the contract, and then the contractors know where they are, and then you've got like 3 months for them to, if there's a new contractor wins the contract, then they will have to mobilize and establish their workforce, and that gives them 3 months. So as soon as the clock ticks over on the 1st of July, there's a lot of work to go through to get the next one out the door and awarded.
Thank you. I think we understand.
Well, yeah, just to that, but I just wanted to make sure that, and that's a very thorough, detailed process, but I wouldn't want to see us sitting in a situation where we get 3 months and we go, oops, in 2 years and in 6 months' time. I'm just making sure that you've got something in place, and it sounds as though you do, and that's reassuring to know that there is a good thorough process, that we end up in the end of this effectively 9-year process. Not being stuck between a rock and a hard place and having to take whatever we can get.
This is true. So that's why we do the procurement strategy, and it has to be all based on evidence and all of that. And it has to be endorsed by NZTA first because they're the biggest shareholder. They're 65%, whatever it is. So they have to be comfortable. And we've got a daisy chain of auditors watching every move we make.
Thank you.
Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Gordon.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Look, John, I've just got a query around the measurement or rating process that you use for the contractor. And specific to your Gilding the Lily comment, do you feel confident that the contractor is performing at, say, 7 out of 10 over all of the district? Or is that an averaging of the score? Because it's not just, if you just let me finish, because, you know, in at least one of the LTP meetings that I went to with His Worship and to meet ratepayers, you know, there are some in isolated gravel roads that would probably say we struggle to even see the lily, let alone a gold one. You know, and this is Upper Turkana Valley, good example.
Yeah, it's because of the One Network roading classification, they award the money per different classification of road. And NZTA audit what we do to see that we're not spending too much and we're not spending too little. So we've had procedural audits and technical audits of the entire network by NZTA, and we'll come through with flying colours. We also collect all the data, which is a requirement of just about everything on the network, and that's what they based a lot of the measurements on, and the quality of the data that we collect for Rangitikei is 85%, which is in the top 17% of the country. Now, with somebody saying there's a pothole at the end of a road somewhere, and basing that as a reflection of the entire network, you must understand that if you strung out the Rangitikei network, it would go from here to Cape Reinga via Gisborne. There's that many roads. So they are inspected with a gravel road, weather, amount of traffic, logging, whatever can affect it. But they meet the response times to go and repair it. So all the criteria, when you trip through it, they're doing good. And they are a good team of people.
Thank you.
Councillor Hira, then myself, and then I think we'll close. Councillor Hira.
So just as to add on to question by Councillor Gordon, are service requests part of the data collection?
That is the service request response is a council internal measure which report to Audit New Zealand to see how fast we are responding to various service requests. In the contract, there is response times for different aspects of work. You know, if it's dangerous, it has to be done within 2 hours. If it's a defect that could be programmed, you can have up to 3 months. So it depends on what it is. But the customer response thing, most of that is a measure of how the shared services team is moving along to address issues. But from a contractual point of view, they're meeting their response times that are stated in the contract.
Just a final question from me. In the LTP meetings, we've had several people comment saying that the bitumen, the asphalt that's applied, seems inferior to some of the other bitumen options. Is bitumen a standard thing?
Yes,
Or,
it all comes from the same place.
okay, that's the answer I was looking for. Thank you. Would somebody therefore like to move a recommendation, at least so there's something on the table for discussion here?
Happy to move a recommendation too.
Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Gordon moving. Do you wish to speak to the recommendation?
No, I think the discussion's been had around the table, Your Worship.
To some extent it has, but that doesn't mean that nobody else can comment. You might want to reserve your right. Is there any other speakers to the motion? Dead right. Obviously the discussion has been adequate.
That's not,
Is there a technical difficulty?
we are talking, if you look in front of you, we are talking about the recommendation to
This is the recommendation that council approves a 3-year extension of the road maintenance contract 980.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's on the same page here. Right, I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Would somebody like to move, and this is really noting the investment rate subsidies, it should be an absolutely pro forma. I'll move from the chair as seconding Councillor Dalgety. Any discussion? No. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Mr Jones, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
diligence and the time you put into this important section.
Thank you.
Moving back now on the agenda to the Chief Executive's report, page 28, and I'll pass over to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll take the report as read. I'll go through 3 items, one of which is a recommendation, and then turn to questions.
Would somebody like to move that we receive the report, please? Thank you, Councillor Hero. Councillor Lambert. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Yes, please.
Item 4 on Council Mark. Carol, would you like to give a quick update on where we're at with Council Mark?
Yeah, sure. So we have got this programmed now, as you'll see, on the 23rd and 24th of August. And so we're taking the opportunity at that workshop on the 17th of May to bring up Dan Henderson, who runs the Council Mark program. And he's going to give quite a good update, especially for new councillors that haven't been involved with this before, about what the process is, where we were ranked with our 2017 assessment. And we'll also look at some of the learnings from that process and what we can do going forward to maybe increase our BB rating, which is what we got last time. As an executive team, we are looking at this prior to that workshop. So we've got a meeting ourselves on the 11th of May to go through it internally, and then we'll bring some of those findings and the roles, responsibilities, etc. to you on that 17th of May meeting. And because TRAC, the members of Te Rupu Ahika will also be in attendance, and they'll be interviewed by the Council Mark assessors at the time. So that's why it's been brought to that joint workshop.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The second point I'd raise is in point 6, the project GIS tool. I didn't mean for that section to be cryptic, but I'm so excited about it, I wanted it to be in there. And I'll ask Arno to just explain a little bit what this is about and when you expect to see and why we're doing it.
Thank you. So what this is about, the new PMO team that we have, they've come up with a really innovative solution with the IT and GIS staff internally. So what we're going to have is a map of the district with little icons, different icons depending on what the project is. But what you can do is you can click on those. It'll give you a bit of information on what it is, maybe a picture or two, how far we are, all kinds of interesting information on all of those projects all over the district. So there's obvious advantages for that. There's information that goes out to the district, but it's also interesting to see how the money is spent over the whole district. It's not all concentrated in one, but if you look at the whole district, you actually see that there's a nice spread of it. So as we've noted in the report, we are working on it. Councillors would probably have access to that quite soon, and then we'll get some feedback and change it up and then ultimately have it on the website.
I think this is a really interesting one for us, and we're stepping out of our comfort zone, because what we're doing is we're providing a whole lot of information which won't encompass every single project that we're working on. It's only the major projects. There's the ones that we consider are significant enough to warrant it being on. And so that will no doubt solicit a whole lot of questions from members of the public. But I see that, and my staff see that as a positive outcome, that we're answering questions and the curiosity of the public as to where their rates are going. Now, there's also a requirement on us to keep it both current as well as correct. And that's a discipline that I'm willing to take on behalf of my team.
Councillor Hero, question?
Well, a question and a comment about the project GIS tool. One of the things that came up last night at an LTP hui at Arsenal was actually really around that, asking about within the document. The LTP document has a lot of information about money getting spent in Taihape, Bulls and Marton, but some of the smaller communities don't see it. And in lieu of the LTP process that we've just been through, where me and Andy has been to at least 25 different places, what may be seen as not necessarily high on the list of what we think. I think for a lot of those communities, actually seeing something, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us to really be out there and say, in places like Mangaweka, in places like Papanui Junction, in places like like Hunterville, to be able to show this, because it isn't. Of course, we've got our three big places, but all of these other areas feed in as ratepayers and residents of this district. So I think that would be a really awesome thing for you. Would have, I would have thought, a lot of positive feedback from our residents to just show their little corner of the universe to see, well, actually this is what council is doing in here, even if it's car sealing X amount of metres of a road. I can tell you in the Papanui district, they'd be really happy about that.
I'm not sure there'll be any rush to seal Papanui, but
Well,
I'll take on board the point.
yeah.
I think, Your Worship, it's also important to recall as elected members, as it is for staff, that Rangitikei District Council are not the only owners of orange cones. And so even now in Bulls, there are activities going on that are close to the footpath that it may be seen that that's council, but it's not. It's actually our activity. So we want to be clear as to what we are responsible for and what we're not. Yeah.
Councillor Dalgety?
Just a couple of comments. I think this would be particularly valuable around the Putarino situation and keeping everyone updated. Some of the other key stats, sort of like RDC seals how many kilometres of road a year, would be another sort of thing that we could, throw information we could throw out there.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Cook.
Separate topic. Item 5, the district-wide archaeological approach. The report that goes to Rupi Ayakar, will that be coming to council as well, or one of the other committees?
I'm not sure if it will come to another committee for approval, because I'm looking at you for this, is Jess available to answer that question?
She will be. She's just on the way, but she will be. But I think what I might just comment on there, I'd be happy to present something to council, absolutely. Really what the idea is, and lessons learned from Bulls, every time we have to apply for a new archaeological authority, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money. And this is a way that we can streamline that whole process. We can apply for the entire district and have a set of things that we would do if we would find something, and that's sufficient then for us to do work all over the district. So that's really what it's about. But yeah, I'm really happy to bring that same report to council for your review if that's required. I just also would like to use the opportunity just to mention that this initiative, as with the GIS tool, is initiated by the new PMO under Jess, and all credit to them. Great ideas, a massive step for us in the right direction, and we hope to build on this and do even better.
So,
thank you.
Your Worship, I might just take your direction. Would council wish us to come back as a decision-making step with regards to the district-wide archaeological approach, or would you wish that to be held at car level?
No, I think it should be back at council level.
Full council? Can we take it as a resolution or
Yes.
a recommendation?
Yeah, I think it just be taken as a direction.
Action, okay.
Councillor Lambert?
So my query is just around it. What designates an archaeological site? Is it older than 100 years, or is there a time frame on it, or do we choose what we think, or is there no?
There is a time frame on it in terms of occupancy prior to the turn of the century.
I don't know.
Well,
There is a time frame set.
through you, Mr. Chair, you're right, there is for the general stuff, but then every site's slightly different. So if it is a site that's younger, but they are quite sure that there was some interesting stuff that would have happened, they would view that in a different light again. It's kind of that unknown every time we do something as to where all these things are going to fall. So this is, again, it's a way to streamline all of that and give us one set of rules and rule.
I think in Bulls, the ruling was that there was occupancy on the site prior to the turn of the century, therefore it is an archaeology.
Thank you for that.
The final point, Your Worship, is on point 8, which was a recommendation included. And that is the Courtyard Residence Committee. Just to recall, when it comes to internal consenting costs, delegations reached to allow me to waive up to 50%. Anything greater than that needs to come to council. So I've presented this as a request for a full 100% waiver of internal consenting costs. And you'll see there's a value in there of what would be expected. It is the Courtyard Residence Committee and it is on a council building.
So that we're speaking to a motion, does somebody want to put a motion on the floor and you'll need to decide whether you agree or don't agree? So there is a recommendation there. So we're speaking to a motion. Would somebody like to move? Yes, and what would be your recommendation is that council agrees to waive 100% of the consent fees for the alterations. That's your recommendation. That's what you're moving, looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Pampa seconding it. Do you wish to speak to it? Any other speakers to Councillor Wilson, Councillor Belsham, Councillor Wilson?
Point of clarification and perhaps technicality that might need to be considered. It's actually slightly against our policy in the fact that it's a retrospective. The policy states, I think I've just been trying to find it and I can't find it, hence I asked for some clarification, that consent and fee waivers and those things are not retrospective. According to the email and the letter that's written here, it says consent fees recently paid for alterations. Now, whilst I understand the intent of that, I'm not quite sure that we could actually pass this.
Well, we could, but we would have to note that it is not, that it is retrospective in nature against the policy.
If that's the case, but I wouldn't mind just getting a little bit of clarity on whether or not it is a retrospective or it's not.
Staff.
Yeah, it's just that the letter we've got here in our order paper says we may be eligible for a rebate on consent fees recently paid for alterations to the Courtyard Community Hall. If it is that, then we would have to certainly note it that it is in slightly different from what our policy is. I just want to see that that was noted.
Okay, let's go and find us the answer. Bearing in mind that, let's go back to the principle first. Councillor Belsham, you wish to speak?
Well, I had a question and it was in regards with the figure of 392185. And I just want a clarification of where that figure removes from. And we talk about rates for emissions from rates that aren't received, and does it fall into that bucket, or does it actually come off the fees received from buildings consent operations? So I'd like to understand where that actually fits in.
And I don't know the answer to that. It would be one for finance, and I'm sorry they're not here to answer that question.
My guess is be the latter option.
I'll guess that as well, but I can't be sure.
Yeah, what a clarification on.
Councillor Duncan.
I was just going to say, while we're waiting for Ms. Prince to return, I could give you an update on number 7 if you like, if it's appropriate.
Certainly.
Just to say that regarding the housing, social housing group in Taihape, we now have a steering group that's been developed, and then along with the Door of Hope Trust representative of Mark Taylor. So the next meeting will be scheduled shortly.
Thank you. Councillor Belcher.
If we're going off the subject at the moment while we're waiting information, item 3, statement of service reporting. Now I see there's been a delay in retrieving that information, and it's to be presented to council at the 27th of May meeting. Normally that would go to finance and performance, because that actually that committee oversees any performance reporting. So is there an issue with it going to finance performance before council?
No, through you, worship. No issue at all. What the issue we are having getting information out of our current RFS system is why there's a delay. So it will certainly go to finance performance first, and probably on the same agenda paper for the May meeting. And just picking up a point that was asked of John Jones earlier about roading RFSs, that's where they are reported, is in that statement of service performance. So it's quite a lengthy document. We now have all the data out of our RFS system and ready, but it hasn't gone through the exec team first, and so they need to cast their eye on it first before it comes to finance and then everybody council.
Yeah, I mean, it's an important report that we need to understand and mull over. So yeah, so for eyes to be on it at the finance performance committee meeting would be would be advantageous. And thank you for clarifying where that service request information sits, because Councillor Hero raised that, is that a performance indicator of the contractor for the roading aspect? And I think it certainly should be sitting in that boat, because if we're receiving a whole lot of service requests but the outcome isn't being delivered, then that needs to be a highly lifted indicator for us to use.
Just to clarify one further thing, it shouldn't be this hard to get information out of our system. So we are stuck with the current system until 1 July, and then we have better systems and processes to be able to report it more regularly.
Right.
So we're just jumping over a hurdle for this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just going
to say, Your Worship, in the interest of time, I'm happy to carry on with that item. But I raised that, noting that it may be, even if we just went ahead and noted somewhere that it may be outside of the standard terms of the policy, perhaps.
exactly where I was going to go. So I think that we can move on the basis that it could be retrospective. But if somebody wants to stop me in terms of that process and say they want a definitive answer prior to that vote, then I will take that as a direction to the chair, and I would support it. But is everybody happy that we continue on? We've got a mover and a seconder. Councillor Hero.
My only question would be if it is, if we agree to waive it, and it isn't what our policy is, what makes this different from anything else? If something else comes to our door, what's going to be the point of difference as to, because somebody else might come next week with something. So how do we differentiate between whether we're going to say yes or no? Otherwise,
would you prefer that we waited till we have an answer?
It's just a question that
I'm prepared to speak to the recommendation, and this group is a highly effective group within our community, and you can see the work that they contribute into that small community out at Kuitiata, and we've already set precedent throughout other areas of the district, and I think it would be remiss if we didn't support this community in the same way. So I'm fully supportive.
Further speakers, Councillor Wilson.
Absolutely, 100% support what Councillor Belsham has said, and in noting in my concern that it it may be outside our policy. Also noting that this is actually a council-owned asset. So when Councillor Hero was asking what's the defining differential between this and perhaps in other requests, this is a council asset that this community committee has done some significant amount of work on. So I am actually in support of the motion as it stands, but I just wanted to bring it to the council's attention that it may be outside of policy. That's all I'm saying.
Any other speakers to the motion? Otherwise, I'll put it to the vote.
Sorry, I just wonder if there are two things that are being asked here. One is, can it be applied for a fee that's already been paid? And secondly, is that included in the specific delegations register? So have they paid? One. And two, is that provision made in the delegations register? If that's, one of those are proven, then we'll have to come back to it anyway. I wonder if we sit this on the table until later in the agenda.
Right. Quite fairly, the question has been asked of the Chief Executive. Look, I'll let this sit on the agenda and we'll take it to a vote process for further information. So on that basis, I will move on to item 10.1, the consideration of establishing Maori wards, page 32. Would somebody like, there's not a recommendation in front of me, but would somebody like to move that we receive the report? Yes. Councillor Hero moving. Councillor Carter seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Again, where possible, to aid the conversation moving forward, what I would like is somebody to move a recommendation so we are speaking to a recommendation. Councillor Hero.
I'd like to move a recommendation that this council looks at the establishment of Māori wards.
So you're moving that having regard to the recommendation from Te Rupe Aika, Council agrees to establish one or more Maori wards, noting that a representation review will need to be undertaken.
Correct.
Councillor Panapo, are you seconding with that nod? First of all, are there any questions of the report? So Councillor Duncan, Councillor Gordon, Councillor Belsham and myself. Councillor Duncan.
I'd like some clarification around the difference between Māori ward councillors representing Māori and not iwi. I don't understand the difference. Sorry, excuse my ignorance.
Take it as synonymous. The interchange of the two words. So when you, okay. So my understanding of this is, first of all, you are electing a ward representative, and how they take that view is the same as any other councillor at the table. So they're not specifically representing Māori or iwi. They are councillor as of right at the table. The fact that they have been elected from that ward is inconsequential in terms of the decision-making process around the table. Correct. So, sorry, who was next? Councillor Gordon.
Yes, I'm looking for someone to explain the resolve minute from Te Rupe Aika, and I'm just seeking to understand the point they're making when it says that Te Rupe Aika recommended to council that they support the establishment of Maori wards throughout the Rangitikei district, and that Maori wards are established on the basis of equal representation, e.g. 50-50. What does that last bit mean? Does that mean for it? No, I'll just leave you to someone to answer it.
My understanding of the electoral process is, first of all, they don't have the opportunity as such to have a 50-50 vote around the table. They may like that as a direction, but we have to undertake the direction they've given us to establish Māori wards. The number of representatives would be a percentage of the people that have elected to go onto the Māori roll against. So for instance, if half of the people in our district said they're going to be on the Māori roll, then half of the seats would, in terms of a ward, would be given to that. Same way that we have to balance plus or minus 10% of a ward structure. So there's not the opportunity, this is not a vote around saying 50% of the people will be identified as Māori.
So may I interpret that the EG 50-50, that the people who put that minute up really didn't understand the proportionality in the Local Government Act or whatever?
I think actually they did understand. It was their directive wish.
Thank you.
Councillor Belcher.
Oh, that's exactly the question I was going to ask. What does the 50-50 representation mean? And you've answered it, that it actually goes through a representation review, which apportions seats.
I'll go for further information, Ms. Gordon, then I'll come back to Councillor Ash, Councillor Panapa, Councillor.
Thank you. Your Worship. Thank you. You'll see that the recommendation does not include the section that Te Rupu Ahika put in there. When they discussed this, they were very much of the favour that we do look at Māori wards, and they were giving that direction to council. And so much so that the chair of that committee said what they would ideally like to see, and whether it's now or in future, is it's a 50-50. And so they included that as part of their resolution. But as the Mayor rightly points out, there's a really strict formula that we have to implement when we're looking at options for how Māori wards will be introduced. And it is based on the number of people in that that have said they are on the Māori ward, and I think there's about 2,850 in Rangitikei district. So we use that as our starting point to see how this will come about. And we're right, this is all about whether you go for Māori wards. It is not about how that will look like. And so that meeting on the 17th, again, we're having a workshop with track members and yourselves to look at options about how the representation will come about, and you'll be put in front of you some options around that. But again, then we have to go through a public consultation process with our preferred option, and then the public can have a say on that. And at the end of the day, the determination is actually made by the Electoral Commission, not us.
Thank you. Great explanation. Councillor Ash, I think you were next. Or does that answer your question?
No, that doesn't answer my question. So I've got a lot of questions in my head, and I guess my first question is, as a district and as council, what is our responsibility and our obligation as far as representing and working with tangata whenua, and is, let's see if I can say this correctly, working with our iwi. And so we have our iwi of the district, and we've had this really great relationship through Te Rupu Ahika. And I know when this has been discussed previously with Te Rupu Ahika, they've come back with the thought that actually the iwi is really well represented through that mechanism, and to actually have a Maori seat would...
You're getting away from a question and moving into a debate stage.
I'm just trying to get my head around what is our responsibility and our obligation. Is it to our local iwi, or is it to Maori as...
So we're legislated by government that we have to engage consultation with iwi. It doesn't, the legislation does not define that it has to be an iwi within your rohe. It just says you need to engage.
So, and with Maori,
So what
Maori
you,
seats, it would be open for anybody as opposed to just our iwi within our district.
correct. In fact, it could be from somebody that stands from outside the district as well.
So they could be from.
So remember, an award structure, councillors, you don't have to reside in that ward to stand for that ward. You have to reside in the ward in terms of voting process. But to stand, you don't have to reside within that ward. The same principles would apply. I suspect that the number of people who may then choose to identify themselves as being on the Māori roll may well change. Once you've established a Māori ward, then there may well be people who say, I'm going to switch from the general role to the Māori role. So there'd be some date that we'd have to lock in terms of the representation review process. Councillor Dalgety, is there a question or we're into a debate?
That's a question.
Go ahead.
I assume track would continue.
Sorry?
I assume track would continue. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the understanding that we would have, and that is the view that track has, and I'd be incredibly surprised if council elected to change that. I would certainly advocate incredibly strongly that track continues in its current role, and that track would still provide a standing member from track on our standing committees. Is it possible to overturn that? Yes, it's possible, but I'd advise very, very strongly against it. Right. We have a mover and a seconder. We're now to the issue of debate. I'm going to cast aside the rules of 3 for and 3 against, because this is a significant item. I will go around the room once, giving the mover the first right of speech, of course. Councillor Hero.
So firstly, I'd like to say that I'm actually a member of TREC. I sit as the Ngāti Whiti Kaupeka delegate on that group. I'm sure people, for those that may not understand it, this question has been through TREC. It's something that's part of. It's not something that TREC they're not the ones that have put it in front of us. The council puts it in front of us because, as you've said, that's one of the processes that are in it. The question that got asked, so I need to be very clear on this. The question that got asked was the support of removing the 5% ability for registered voters to then take it into council to say yay or nay. That was what the initial, that was the question that all TREC delegates were asked, whether they supported that. So of course, in supporting that, then that would, in effect, would then step us into Māori wards. As part of democracy and as part of a council that espouses that, that we're looking at inclusion and a number of things that we do. It just makes total sense to me that this is just another step for this council to be brave, because the reality is that out there in the wider Aotearoa, it can be seen as something that if the majority of councillors that sit around the table are not tangata whenua or not from a different culture, the reality is that people that vote people in may not necessarily see you as someone that supports it. So I want to say to all councillors to be brave as councillors. Don't just talk it. Don't just talk that we're part of this. Don't just talk that we were inclusion and we want European or Pākehā and Māori to work together in this district. Be brave and let's move this forward.
Thank you. I'll go around this way. Councillor Belsham.
Thank you. I certainly agree with your sentiments, Councillor Hero. We have talked the talk, and I believe this is another stepping stone in walking the walk. we've taken the step of including a representative from Te Rūpu Ahi Kā to sit on our committees and on our standing committees. And that in itself has been a brave step that this council has taken. And it's working extremely well for iwi and the whole wider district to be getting on together and making decisions together. And this is another stepping stone in that direction. So I support this recommendation.
Thank you. By the way, if we go around the room and you don't wish to speak to it, then it just moves on. Councillor Carter, do you wish to speak?
I'm a little lost in the groupings of the wards. We have the north, south and central wards at present. Then you'll have a Maori ward going over the whole thing. Do we also get representation from the other groups coming into our communities, such as the Samoans and the Indians and that sort of thing? That is a concern that I have as to where we go in that respect. If you're looking for representation from different groupings.
At the moment, there's been no proposal from any other group, and so you could take it with the representation review, the makeup of individual wards, and the number of councillors at the table will undoubtedly change, or number of councillors could change. The representation review will take us through that process. It's quite likely that you may still have a central, northern, southern ward and a Maori ward. And then you'd have to decide the number of councillors, and then the makeups of those boundaries would be looked at.
Yeah, with the general voting as it is now for the general public, we've got three of our colleagues that are of the Maori perspective in our votings. If people are prepared to put themselves forward in that respect, why do we need the ward?
Correct. And a number of people will hold that view. That people that are Maori can be elected at large in any one of the other wards. That's Councillor Dalgety, good to.
Thank you, Tracy, for your sentiments. I think that under the Treaty of Waitangi, co-design is important, and I think you have to be at the table to co-design. So I will be voting in favour of.
Councillor Panapu.
I just want to add a statement of clarification in terms of what was raised at the table at Te Rūpu Ahi Kā. There was a statement made by the chairman that at the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi, those who signed didn't have proportional representation in mind. And so therefore that was what was put forward as the basis for a 50-50 representation around this table. That's the view of some. My personal view is that even if one Māori is sitting at this table, that's a 50-50 representation under the Treaty of Waitangi. In relation to the identification of who is Māori, the statement that was made through Te Rūpu Ahi Kā is a statement of principle, not a statement of applicable practice. So we've got to work with what we've got in the system that we're in. So the principle is stated, we accept that, we acknowledge that, but now how do we make that work? Now, the reality is that there is a partnership under the Treaty of Waitangi between Māori and everyone else. So you've got Pākehā and Tauiwi. The distinction of Pākehā are the British that came, Tauiwi are everyone else who came along with them or after them. So a relationship between two partners, irrespective of who Tauiwi and Pākehā are, is between Māori and Pākehā. So it is a measure of justice to formalise that relationship in around this table. But when we look at central government, we've got 7 Māori seats. Originally there were 4, I think it's 7, but that is a indication of Māori being at this table of the Westminster type system of governance. The amazing thing that we have in our council, in our district, is Te Rōpū Ahi Kā. Now, this is another layer of representation. We have every hapu, I would hope every hapu, represented through Te Rōpū Ahi Kā who bring their voice to this table. So that is an important element, and the way that I've described it to the body itself, Te Rōpū Ahi Kā, is that there's 2 analogies I use. One is there's a waka. They are the motive power for that waka to bring Māori ideas, thoughts, initiatives, innovations to the council table, and Tracy, myself and Coral are the steerers to make sure that there is a understanding with a governance role, a governance perspective in terms of how Māori can bring those ideas within a Pākehā framework or a Pākehā house. The other analogy is that the council has established a bridge between Māori and Pākehā, and Tracy, myself and Coral are just new lanes on that bridge, and all we're there to do is to increase the consultation process. But in terms of iwi, I mean, I have no ties whatsoever to Ngāti Apa, and yet I'm sitting around this table. That's one of their concerns about Māori wards. What's to say that every Māori that gets elected doesn't have Ngāti Apa ties and therefore doesn't actually speak for Ngāti Apa? That's something that we have to consult as Māori representatives with iwi to make sure that they are comfortable that our intent and our hope is to work with them from an iwi perspective in the same way that they would, in a more expanded way than they would even expect to consult with the council itself. I hope that's helpful. So long and short, I'm in agreement with Māori wards. How they end up looking is going to be a matter of robust debate, because we've got to get this right, because this actually sets a tone for Indigenous communities around the world and their efforts of reconciliation with their prospective governments. So,
Thank you. Councillor Ash.
Yeah, like I said, got lots of questions in my head, and I am really in favour and have always been in favour of having Māori wards and Māori seats through, whether it be local or central government. I did say, obviously, with Te Rōpū Ahi Kā, we've been really fortunate to have that great relationship with all of the iwi and hapu around the district, and we've been incredibly fortunate that democracy has brought around the table 3 awesome councillors as well that have been able to that have been able to support our understanding along those lines. I guess the other questions that I would have in my mind would be, how does the cost play out? Does that mean that we reduce other seats to? That would still be my big cost. In principle, I'm voting yes, because yes, I absolutely support the working with Māori seats, etc. I just still got the big questions in my head, but that'll.
Councillor Gordon.
So from the outset, I support the motion. I suppose if you're looking at framing this in terms of steps, you know, Te Rōpū Ahi Kā was our first step in honouring the document on the wall over there, and this is probably the second step. And these steps are pretty brave, and those are sometimes the hardest steps, but they're also the biggest dividends. You know, you might really think about these, but once you make them, that's when the good stuff comes. I'd also note, you know, that this is my 3rd term on council. I think when I joined the council, I don't think there were any Māori representatives sitting at the table. And I just note. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologise to Sarai, who's not here. Look,
She'll be watching.
Yes, she probably is watching it. You know, having this debate is excellent. And we've got 3 ward councillors now instead of 1 to help guide the process. So that's excellent. You know, and I just welcome more discussion and more debate. And I guess for Murray, it's going to be, and especially for iwi, it's going to be a really interesting debate for them. I really concur with Waru's comments about how does a Maori ward person then reflect the views of individual hapu and iwi. That's going to be challenging, but that's their debate, not ours. So I fully support the motion.
I fully support this, and I think Councillor Hero has made the comment. You walk the talk. One of the ironies could be that we actually end up with fewer Maori representatives around the room. So under the numbers that we have, we may well have, for instance, 2 Maori people elected positions within a Maori ward. We currently have 3 councillors that are Maori. How they elect to stand is their concern. We could equally have more. We could have other people that are Maori standing for the other wards. But absolutely, I support this. Councillor Duncan.
Yes, I'd like to totally support Tracy, and thank you for moving this. Totally agree. My concerns are around having more layers of governance. But I also see that it's going to be really exciting to see how the community forms this, because it will be created in the community, which is exciting. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Worship. What's interesting in this is that this is matter has been before council in the last triennium, and what was interesting in that was at that stage, Turupi Car came back to us and said they weren't ready, and they asked us not to progress it any further. So what's interesting about that now is the fact that this is a recommendation that has come from Turupi Car tells me that they are ready, and also tells me that they're ready to take on the challenges that Councillor Panapa has indicated in what he said earlier with how that representation may fall with regards to the different iwi and hapu that group represents. Getting lost in how it may unfold is not the issue of this. The reality of it is noting that a representation review will be needed to be undertaken. Those of you that have been on council in the past and not first on councils need to understand that a representation review is a lengthy and quite a complex process to go through that will all answer all the questions that you've all been sitting around the table answering as to who will do what and how it will be and the cost and the representation, etc., etc. That will all unfold. So I'm just saying that the fact that this comes to us from Turupi Car, again, they weren't ready before, but they're ready now. There's a strong signal to me that an agreement with the recommendation is the right action to take.
One of the drivers is the law change about removing the petition rights. Councillor Lambert.
Yeah, I always seem to be last, and there's a lot of what I say has already been said, but I'll carry on. Yeah, I think if we do vote against it, it's not going to go away. It will come up again, and it is going into public consultation, which is what we want. Thrash the issue out completely. As I say, as a rural council, we are naturally innovative and progressive. So we will be embracing it. But I agree with you, Your Worship. My concern would be we could end up with less Māori representation on council. People will see the Māori ward as that's the Māori representative on the council sorted and not vote accordingly. But as I say, it's going at public consultation. It's going to be thrashed about, and that's what we want. So I will be voting in favour.
Thank you. Go back to a right of reply, Councillor Hero.
I'd just like to thank you all for your thoughts, because it is a big issue. At the end of the day, I'm sure every single one of you are going to be and our community that are out there in Facebook land will be coming back to ask you all individually, why did you say what you said? I just want to pick up on a couple of things. So it got asked about why shouldn't there be any other Indigenous or other groups around the table not having the same opportunity. The first thing, what I would say in response to that is that those other groups are not tangata whenua to this whenua, we are. So that's my first, that's the first thing I'd say. I'd also like to say that when I sit and I make it quite clear at every single Te Rōpū Ahika group that meeting that I'm at, I sit there with the hat as an Ngāti Whiti Kaupeka delegate. I do not sit there as a council member. So I just want people to be clear on that. My thinking and the direction that I get from the group that I'm, well, the iwi that I represent, it comes from them. It's not coming from, it's not coming from. I'm just lucky that that we're privy to other information. So I just want to make that clear. The other thing that I wanted to say is the difference between track and iwi, because I think you said something about with Ratana, for instance, they sit at they are for Ratana, if I just use that as an example, they're quite unique, very unique within the rangitike, and that where they're placed up in Ratana itself. And what said this last night at the LTP Hui, that they're also they have the ability to sit on that track group. And it is, I've talked to lots of people across the country about track in itself, or Te Rōpū Ahika, and how that's been set up. And that is a brave thing that, as far as I'm concerned, this council has done, and we need to keep being brave. We need to keep being brave. We need to keep having our armour on to be able to take those hits, because they come. They definitely come. They come all the time. People will make those hits at you as to, why you're there. I didn't stand, and I want to say that I didn't stand with the expectation that the only people that might vote for me because I'm Māori are Māori, because the reality is that I believe that the majority of people that voted for me were the general public of Taihape in that area. So when you say, when we talk about that there's now three Māori representatives here, the reality in my mind, and I don't want to be offended by this, is that Waru, in my head, one of the key reasons that you got in Waru was because, and I heard it actually down in Bulls when people were talking, when some of those residents were talking about how they needed to have a representative specifically from Ratana. And of course, Soraya sat as a councillor here for many years. So that, in my mind, is one of the key reasons that that people were very cognizant of that, and hence the reason that you were able to get in. Again, also with Coral came in, and at the end of the came around our table. It's the lowest voter turnout. The thing is that Coral was probably able to put, when you look at who went up against Coral, she probably would have had a lot of the people that she was hooked into. I think it was 230 off the top of my head. So just because we got in, it's not good. I haven't just got in here because I happen to be Māori. As far as I'm concerned, that's just another thing that I believe helped me to get in there. And it's not, so whoever's going to, and if this does come about, and we do have a Māori ward, whoever is going to sit in that space, it's going to be a hard place to sit, and exactly what Waru was talking about, because the reality is that the comeback from it of those 13 iwi, 14 iwi that sit around the track table are going to be very focused in on that person. But I just want to total and thank everybody for being brave, because it is, I believe it is brave, and our council is making a brave move by supporting it. So thank you.
I now must put the motion to the vote. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. Now, or can I move on? I want to tidy up that other motion first. Okay, we'll go back and tidy up the motion on the floor. This is about the waiver of consent fees. Have we got a further information from staff?
So there are two things. Firstly, they have paid. The second thing is that there's no mention we can find in the delegations register that prevent being paid or yet to be paid. But we do have resolutions from the February 2015 council meeting that gives council, with respect to consent and other fees or administrative charges incurred by a local not-profit community organisation, reserves to itself any decision to remit or waive any such fee. So we're covered by resolution.
Thank you.
So there'll be no need to change the recommendation.
So we have a mover and a seconder that they agree to waiver of the consent fees. The advice is we can proceed with that as is.
Correct.
Can we put this straight to a vote, councillors?
Yes.
Right, could I have those in favour?
No.
Those against? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Moving back then in the order paper to the next one is the...
Excuse me, we just like to pause while we get this recommendation.
I move that recommendation.
I think it was Councillor Belsham, Councillor Carter, I think. Oh, with Councillor Panapo,
Sorry.
no, Councillor Carter, Councillor Panapo.
Wrong recommendation.
Yeah. Sorry.
Stand by my man.
You're on both sides of your team.
Don't get him as protector.
There must be a song about that.
Dolly singer.
Yeah.
I think it's just again, right?
But nice timing. Mover and seconder happy? Right, thank you, carried. Moving back to the draft submission, the supporting sustainable freedom camping in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the discussion document. Who's fronting this? Galen, you are. Thank you, Ms. Brooks.
So just in preparing this draft submission, Katrina and I have also had conversations with Murray from the Parks and Open Spaces perspective, also Johan Regulatory, and we also attended a regional tourism Zoom meeting. There was a presentation there by an MB policy advisor just highlighting the considerations for local government, which very much reflected what we've put into this and had already come to those conclusions. So there's just some background. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Ash first. Questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the reports. Was interesting. Wondering if you have some dollar figures around currently how much it may cost to clean up after freedom campers versus how much it may cost to be cleaning up after locals, like the fly tipping and stuff. Would it be more that we pay for picking up after freedom campers, or more that we'd be paying for picking up after locals?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that off the top of my head. I have to follow that up.
Sorry. Are you willing to follow it up? Yes or no, or do you just not know?
I don't know.
Right, yeah. So if the councillor elects to ask you to follow it up, then we'll do so.
Okay.
When I read through this document, councillors, I'm new. First of all, we'll tidy up receipt of the document first. Councillor Hero, Councillor Carter, those in favour? Those against, carried. But when I look through the proposals that have been put forward, I think it may be easier to deal with each proposal separately and then have, on the basis of that vote amongst those proposals, we have one person who then moves and seconds. So we evolve our way through this. So if I take that option around proposal 1, and this is making it mandatory for freedom campers in a vehicle to be done in a certified self-contained vehicle, and this applies to anywhere in the district. So for instance, if you are saying that would ban somebody from freedom camping everywhere in our district if it wasn't self-contained. Maybe the easiest way is how many would support that? Could we have a show of hands? So everybody thinks that somebody should be able to freedom camp. Okay. That clears that one up in my mind. So the first proposal would be no. The second proposal, making it mandatory for freedom campers to stay in a vehicle that is self-contained unless they're staying at a site with toilets. And I'm thinking of the number of sites in our district where entry into the ranges or wherever that don't have toilets. Have we a view around the table about this one?
Got a question?
Yeah, question I can take.
So the report itself, did it not exclude areas such as ranges and dock areas and stuff? So that doesn't come into this, does it?
Just from the way that I read it, it's anywhere within our district, which includes dock and wherever. So Gordon.
Oh, I've got a question, Your Worship. How on earth is some agency going to define who on earth is a freedom camper or not? I mean,
lots of councils do.
Yeah, I'm fully aware. So, I mean, I guess this is aimed at the foreign tourist market that at the moment doesn't exist. I mean, if we wind the clock back 3 years, there were hundreds of kids knocking around in cheap little vans, you know, with a mattress in the back, staying wherever. But if I was to get my camper van, if I had one, and it didn't have a toilet, and go and stay at, and I pull over beside the beach at Koitiata or anywhere else for that matter, would I be a freedom camper? Question mark. And if there was a toilet there, if proposal 2 stacks up, then that would mean if I didn't have a toilet in the van and there was a public toilet or camp area there that I could use, then that makes it fine. But if I go to a river crossing, let's say, if I went down the state at Toi Toi Bridge, just south of Taihape on the side of the Rangitikei, there's no toilets there, so that would make that illegal, in inverted commas.
Depending on which you support in here.
Exactly.
So this is about a submission process. Councillor Lambert, Councillor Ash.
I am in favour of the proposal. As an ex-freedom camper many years ago, and I actually did have to have a haircut, I think it's an integral part of the tourist market, especially in our area. Passing something that means, carrying on from Councillor Gordon, with what you define a freedom camper, what you don't define, it does give you a tool in the toolbox to deal with freedom campers. You could probably make the call on whether there is, but I am in favour of proposal 2.
So you're in favour making it mandatory for freedom campers to stay in a vehicle that is self-contained unless they are staying at a site with toilets.
Yeah, I support that.
How many would support that? Can we just raise hands again, please? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more. Okay, so proposal 2 would be a yes. Interesting, because this is a reversal of what you had previously decided, by the way. If you go back in time, council had said we will still allow freedom campers respected. Yeah, Councillor Ash.
So on proposal 2, I don't know that, well, in essence, it sounds good. I don't know that I support it though.
We've had that vote. Sorry.
You actually did say my name that I'd get to speak to it and then voted before we got there.
Apology.
Having just spent a couple of weeks down south and speaking to all sorts of people that are camping in all manner of vehicles and what have you. A lot of people didn't actually have the self-containment stickers, etc., but it did actually come along with their own equipment, their portaloos, their what have you, and they were responsible, but they weren't in a position to actually have, I don't know, we hired a motor camper, so I'm guessing a lot of people aren't in a position to maybe do that. I just think it adds, I'm more in favour of a whole lot of education around this. When we hired our motorhome, there wasn't the education there, we weren't informed of anything. I think there's more responsibility that needs to be around education. Yeah, and they're talking about making sure all of this is in place before the internationals come. Well, it's not always the internationals that are an issue. But anyway, I don't know that I'd vote for that.
Okay, what I'm going to try and do here is move on because we've had the show of hands. Proposal number 3 is around improving the regulatory tools for government and land managers and potential infringement schemes. So how many would support improving the regulatory tools? Doesn't say exactly what they are, but yes, I'll take questions.
I suppose it's Galen might be the appropriate one to answer. Does the current legislative environment limit the tools we have?
So currently, a council can legislate in terms of imposing fines against people that break their own rules in terms of freedom camping areas, but they're not set by, you know, national boards. They're independently levied by councils. So you'd be a sign on a site saying you camp here, you face a possible fine. Is that?
Yes, and we don't have a freedom camping bylaw. So at the moment we're governed by the Freedom Camping Act.
Subsequent question, if I may, if in any of our neighbouring councils that have a bylaw, is there something that gets in the way from at national level that limits their ability to act?
I don't know.
In spite of the lack of knowledge, are we prepared to submit on that, or are we going to say we don't have enough information? Councillor Belsham.
Well, one of the in that proposal, one of the recommendations is introducing a regulatory system for self-contained vehicle certification. And previously, we've agreed that we will not allow freedom camping with non-certified vehicles unless there's a toilet nearby. So there has to be a process to identify the certification of those vehicles. And that's what proposal 3 encompasses. So I believe they go hand in hand.
Excuse me.
Take your point, yes.
Through you, Your Worship, I can just clarify, at the moment, there's opportunity for infringements for up to $200, and they're proposing to increase that to up to $1,000.
That's as part of the freedom camping.
Take on board your comments, and that changes my view. I would personally support proposal 3.
Yeah, I think I do too.
Can I have a show of hands? Who would support proposal 3? Carried. Okay. We'll put this all back together into a motion in some way. Proposal 4, strengthen the requirements for self-contained vehicles. Suitable toilets and vehicles. Isn't this effectively part of 3? Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Belsham, Councillor Dalgety.
I think it's referring to, at the moment, there's pretty much, or my understanding, having met people that have done it, there's a black market in stickers. So you can just get your sticker out of Auckland and put it on whatever sort of vehicle, and it's supposed to be a pass. And so I think that's referring to trying to stop that, and that you actually have to prove what you've got on board.
Advice from staff?
Yes, it differs from proposal 3. Proposal 3 is commented on by Councillor Dolsham, but it talks about regulatory tools, including vehicle confiscation and other tools available. This is, if I understand it correctly, and I'm looking to my staff as well, is that if there is a self-contained vehicle, what are the regulations for that self-containment? That council, so it's specific to and on board.
Right. Yeah, okay, I get that. Do you still need a spot? Councillor Belsham?
Well, just so that this is saying what are the rules around those self-contained vehicles, and it talks about having a fixed holding tank that can be emptied at dump stations, rather than a mobile one. But I see a lot of vehicles with those mobile type dumping stations. Have we had instances? Have we had many instances of people dumping?
We've had a few. We've had some where they have used, instead of going to a dumping station, they'll actually use like a public toilet block, just where you can get those like the small chemical type toilets, and they'll empty them in there. So there's been that type of thing.
Yeah, I'm just worried that it may end up basically removing half the vehicles out of the certification process just because they've got a mobile collection station rather than a fixed one.
And I think also the certification will have, it might be suitable for one person, like they might have a small chemical toilet and they might say that's suitable for 1 or 2 people. A fixed one you might have up to 6 people, or it's 3 days. Can hold 3 days waste.
I hate to think what rugby team on the bus trip.
Yeah, no, my understanding was that it was firming up a higher level of type of toilet, etc., on the vehicle, and I just think that would be, I think it's unnecessary given how many people it would affect and how many people currently might use a public toilet to empty their cassettes. I can't imagine that would even, well, it's possibly not terribly pleasant. You know, it's not the worst thing that could happen, but there's dumping stations right around the country. If you have a look at Campermate app, there's dumping stations everywhere for people to empty their cassettes anyway. So I think this would just be adding too much.
Does somebody emptying a single person type facility cause a problem in our toilets?
Sometimes I'd say it's unpleasant for the cleaners to clean up spillage and that type of thing, and from a hygiene point of view.
So can I clarify, Your Worship? So, Galen, this would actually, what proposal 4 is about strengthening requirements. So it actually may strengthen requirements for these single person units and how they're to be operated in terms of emptying as well as the fixed.
So,
am I thinking along the right lines?
So we are suggesting that they be a fixed type.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right. Look, I think we sort of understand where this is. How many of those would support proposal 4? We've got flags at half mast. How many of those would support proposal 4? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I think we've got a majority.
Your Worship, if this is going in a submission, could we broaden out 4 to actually be inclusive of the variety of different toileting mechanisms that could be used, as long as the appropriate guidance or regulation was put in as to how they're to be emptied? I mean, if these cassette things work, then surely in the regulation at a dump station or wherever, there can be an appropriate mechanism to put there to empty them. I think flexibility is the key to actually getting adoption. There's 5 different types. Let's include 5 different types.
Yeah, I'm wary about relitigation of all this. Councillors, Councillor Ash, Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to state it. We've got so many private owners of motorhomes right through the country that this will affect just about all of them, because other than the very high-end ones, they have the cassettes that just pull out. The cassettes are so easy to use. Honestly, I've used all sorts of different ones in other people's vehicles over the years. It's simple to use. There's not a lot of spillage. If anybody was ever to use a toilet, I don't know anybody that ever has, but they're really simple to use. I'm just wary of how many people that would actually impact on through the country that all belong to the Motorhomes Association, etc.
Councillor, you've made that point as well.
Just making it firmer.
Do you wish to bring something new to the table?
Well, yes, I do. I just think I need to point out to the members of sitting around, we're not writing the policy. Okay, we're not here to try and figure out the regulations and the finer points and the wormhole that we're going down as to what's a good toilet, what's a bad toilet, and whether or not someone can empty it or they can't empty it. That's not what we're here to do. We're either putting a submission into this piece of information and we're submitting it forward against. We're not writing the policy.
No.
So I think we should stop trying to write the policy and move on.
Right, councillors, I think we've got to a stage where the way that I read this is with regard to the consultation on the 4 aspects of freedom camping that we've been asked to submit on. It's a no to 1, but we're supporting the 2s, 3 and 4, which tend to go together because they're saying number 1 or 2s, 3 and 4. That sort of makes sense the way that I read it. Would somebody like to move a motion to that effect?
Excuse the words.
Yeah. Councillor Wilson moving, Councillor Belsham seconding.
Nice motions.
Need to put it to a vote, but I need to. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. So now, councillors, we have Tricia Faulkner here. We have, do you wish to stop now and have something to quick drink and then start again in councillor and public excluded, or do you wish to deal with public excluded?
We must stop now, Your Worship. It's 2 hours.
Right. Staff have reminded me that it is 2 hours and we have to stop. So we'll start again with public excluded at 3:15.